When we were little, we were always curious. We know that as adults, when we have babies and little people in our universe, like they are so curious about.
Oh yeah, the endless stream of questions, right?
Right. Why and how come and like let's explore it and let's eat it and let's let's check it all out. And as we grow up, that's one of the things that often gets damped down, suppressed in our universe, is that innate curiosity. And I think the more that we can really get curious about, that's so interesting. I wonder why that's happening.
Learning to swim is about learning from others. Be the author of your own story, not a character in somebody else's story. Get inspired by others to take action. Learn how to set goals to exceed your own expectations. So often the answer that you are looking for is right in front of you. On Learning to Swim, we highlight those answers through storytelling. So, Janine, good morning. It is Casual Friday, and welcome to Learning to Swim.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be here with you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you on today. So Janine is someone that is such a dear, dear friend to me, and not someone that I've necessarily known that long, but do you know when you have those moments where you meet someone and you feel like you've known them forever, and you have such a instant connection? And that is what happened with Janine and I. And I was, we had originally met because it was an HR meeting, Pyra, right?
Yep.
And you were co-presenting, remind me the exact title. It was the civility.
Devastating impact of incivility on the bottom line.
Yeah. And it was just such a fantastic presentation. So many just great takeaways. And I immediately afterwards said, that was great. Can we connect? And we did. And we've had fun and collaborated on some really great projects since then. I know that we're going to do more in the future. Just to give you a little bit of background, Janine Hamner Holman is a nationally recognized speaker and expert on leadership development, organizational management, and how our brains work. That's one of the things that she and I have in common. We love that whole brain science piece of it. And she does a lot of work with around the leadership space, and also attracting and retaining great talent. One of the things that Janine and I have done together, and that she brought to a workshop that we were doing, is the concept of leading from every chair, which I love. So just, kind of empowering people at any level within an organization to assume or, embody qualities of leadership. And how, just that elevates the team, but it elevates everybody when we do those things. More than 30 years experience.
Which means she's old.
I know, the same thing happens to me when I start thinking about the decades that I've been doing things. Like, wow, that's either we started really young or we're old, but
exactly.
whatever.
Yep. I started this work when I was 7.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You were just, very, very precocious,
Exactly.
a very precocious child. Janine uses scientifically validated strategies and tools to build high performance teams, enhance organizational functioning, and develop organizations and leaders with whom everyone wants to work with. That's great. I love that. And I can definitely attest to that. She has worked with everything from Fortune 200 companies to local nonprofits that are motivated to create a great working environment while enhancing the bottom line. So welcome.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to jump right in as per usual with Learning to Swim. There's no prep. It's really about, catching you in the moment. And these are, most of the questions were crafted pre-COVID and kind of pre this very unusual time that we're living in, both with a pandemic and social unrest and then we're both in Southern California, so you can add fire to that. And
we just had an earthquake.
Oh my gosh, that's right. We just had an earthquake. So yeah,
the locusts are coming soon.
Well, I've had a couple of big giant grasshoppers in the backyard, so they may be here. But
excellent.
So with that, the first question being, what does resilience look like to you?
Oh man, that's such a good question. So what resilience looks like to me is at least two things, maybe three. So part of it is internal. So part of it is about developing an ability to go with the flow a little more than we might otherwise really be wired to do. And one of the things that I talk with folks about is, back to brain science, our brains do not like it when things are uncertain. And we are now in a time of just perpetual uncertainty. And it feels like maybe things are getting better and then things take a step back, or maybe we're gonna move forward to the new normal or the next normal, and then things revert a little. And so it's very disconcerting for our brains. And so whatever we can do, practices like mindfulness, practices like meditation, just taking a deep breath, can really be helpful in developing personal resilience. And then, because a big part of what I do professionally is work inside organizations, then there's the issue of organizational resilience, which really also ties in very much to organizational agility. Organizations that are big have a hard time being agile. It's hard to make a decision quickly. It's hard to move something forward fast. It's hard to pivot. It's a place where smaller and mid-sized organizations are actually much better positioned, because they can often implement changes faster and develop that agility, which then leads to resilience. Once change, and we all know change is a part of life. There's good changes, there's not so good changes. We're right now, unfortunately, in a prolonged period of challenging changes. Mm-hmm. I was just emailing earlier today with my former boss, and somebody that we both know and loved, who worked for the organization, very big organization, was just hit riding on his bicycle. And my old boss and I are about the same age. This gentleman was, 5 years older than us, essentially our peer, and was out riding his bike, was hit, and the next day passed away. And there's just, I think that's the 7th person that I've known in this time who has died. So obviously that wasn't COVID related. Some are COVID related. For me, 7 people dead in 6 months, that's way too many. Yeah. And so we're trying to manage personally and organizationally a lot of change, which then, there are 3, which then brings up the third thing, which is empathy. It's so interesting how much this word is being thrown around these days. In part, it's because with COVID, leaders have figured out that for those who actually have a strong sense of empathy, and often usually also a higher emotional intelligence, they are leaning into their empathy. And empathy is essentially, when I imagine what life is like for you over there, and then I am with you in your experience, That's empathy. And so leaders are leaning into that and realizing they're getting a lot more connection with their people. Their people are feeling both seen and known, and then more excited and invested in the work of the organization. And so leaders are figuring out, like, ooh, there's something to this. We are working better in this time. We also are in the midst of a presidential election at the time that the nation is more divided than ever. And we have a leader who is strong on empathy, and another leader who is, if you look sort of at the facts of the matter, less strong on empathy. And so there's this conversation. I walked in, my husband was watching the NBA on TNT the other day, and there was a former coach, now a commentator. I think he was an NBA player, then he was a coach, now he's a commentator, who was talking about empathy. So like, it's now in the domain of sports, which is, you know, the sports and military are sort of the last two places that you would really think of.
Right.
Let's be empathetic with each other, and that's where it is now. And so, which helps us when we feel known and seen. It helps us develop more resilience, it helps the organization develop more resilience, and it helps the team develop more resilience. So those are my thoughts on resilience.
I like it. I absolutely, and thank you for bringing the concept of empathy in, because I do think that, yes, it is interesting how that has become a new buzzword. And I do think that it is very, very interesting to see how, you know, people or organizations that may not have been kind of aware of it or really in an intentional way, you know, recognizing you know, what that is and the value it brings to the experience and to the connection and all of that. So I'm glad to have that piece in there. So kind of on the flip side, what does failure look like to you?
So failure to me, I will tell the truth. Failure to me still looks like, man, I did not enjoy that. That was not great. And I feel that sense of disappointment in myself, disappointment in the process, disappointment, frustration. And this is one of those do what I say, not what I do,
right,
kind of times. One of the things that I teach, and I think that this is so great, because even when I'm teaching it, I'm honest about, like, this is how we experience failure. And we experience failure this way because this is how we've been socialized. We've been socialized failure. And if we are honest with ourselves, when things are hard, when we are flexing a new muscle, when there's a breakdown, when we totally screw something up, those are actually our opportunities to learn. Yeah. When everything is going swimmingly, when we've learned how to swim, when everything is going swimmingly, then we're just swimming.
Yeah.
And when things break down, when we break down, is actually when growth happens. And so, you know, failure is an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to do something else. I was just doing a webinar on Wednesday, and I was talking about the U.S. Marine Corps has the motto, Semper Fi, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. And they debrief everything. Like, they debrief things that are really important and things that are much more mundane. Like, we made eggs for breakfast today. How did that go? What did we learn? What could be better? What did we do great that we want to keep doing? And because their motto is always faithful, and because they have each other's back, failure, like, those eggs really sucked. Okay, great. What can we learn about that? It's not you made sucky eggs. It's
right.
the eggs sucked. And so now what can we as a group learn going forward? And so when you debrief everything, and when you do it well, and when you have a high trust culture, which the Marines do, Semper Fi, then it's not, failure is not an opportunity for public flagellation. And like, that's usually what it is. We are afraid to fail because we're afraid of that feeling, but we're also afraid of the repercussions.
Right.
And so when we develop high trust cultures and organizations, then it's okay to fail because that's what humans do. And now what can we learn? What can we learn individually, and what can we learn as a group going forward to make us stronger?
Yeah. Well, I will say that's one of the recommendations, you know, and you and I have worked together, and I think we collectively have made this recommendation to organizations that, you know, to, you know, the idea of feedback. And really, so most of the time, the way that it is done within the corporate world is feedback means, you know, come into my office and this, and, you know, and it's immediately, you know, it's just that you're feeling defensive, you've got, you know, that knot in your stomach, and which is not a place where you can actually hear things, right? It's interrupting your ability to really hear this. And so, you know, you and I have encouraged organizations to, number one, have those regular check-ins, so that, and also really have feedback be kind of both sides of the coin, the stuff that you did really well and the stuff where there's an opportunity for growth. So, you know, really by, like your example with the Marines, like by debriefing everything, you then normalize that conversation, and you end up, it's so much more fruitful because, again, that, you know, that anxiety and all that, you know, what is it? The cortisol, the stress hormone is not, you know, racing through your bloodstream because it's like, oh, feedback. Okay. That's, yeah. Yeah. That public.
Right. And one of the things that's super interesting is that the two younger generations in the workforce, the millennials and the Gen Zs, they really want feedback. And there've been all of these different studies and meta studies of studies that show that human beings do much better when the feedback is focused on the things that we do well, which makes sense because often if we're being told about things that we don't do well, we actually become a little bit deaf. We can't really hear very well.
Right.
Which is part of why that old tradition that used to happen of giving the feedback sandwich, something good, something bad, something good,
right,
is so ineffective because we hear the something good, but we're waiting for the something bad, so we can't really internalize it.
Right.
We get the something bad, we're trying to focus on that. We get something good, we can't hear that at all because we're still freaking out over this. And so it's a complete waste of time. It's much better to focus the majority of what we're talking about on people's strengths, on where they're great, on where they're strong, helping them get stronger in those areas. And then in a different conversation, an opportunity for growth. And you want to have that be one of the 80-20 rules. Like 80% of what you talk about is where they're strong and how to get stronger. Yeah. And about 20% is where you're really looking on correcting behavior. But if it's more than that, because our brain is so focused on keeping us safe,
right.
That's ultimately the only thing our brain cares about.
Yeah.
Am I safe? How about now? If we're getting more than 20% of the feedback is opportunities for growth, which is negative, then we stop hearing it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I love, you and I are both familiar with the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. And one of the best, I know there's multiple versions now. I read it back when there was the original version that was more centered on students.
Right.
And so, and also the parenting piece, and which, obviously they figured out that these concepts are applicable in all these different arenas. And so one of the things that I do love that she brings up in that book is the importance of when you are giving people positive feedback or praise, the being very specific about it, rather than these kind of generalizations of like,
you're doing such a good job.
Good job, and just being as specific as you can, and how helpful that is.
I was just giving a client yesterday that feedback. I said, did you tell your employee that? And he said, well, I make sure every few weeks to tell her she's doing a great job. Like, that's awesome.
That is. And follow up. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
The more specific you can be. And right now she's doing a really great job about this specific thing.
Right.
So now is your opportunity.
Well, so how do you, when I think about all these different concepts, and one of the areas that I'm always fascinated with is creativity and problem solving and thinking outside of the box and all that good stuff. And so for me, it's directly related to being curious. So how do you remain curious, and is that something that you think about, how the curiosity piece fits into your overall work, and just, both the work that you're doing with other organizations and also the work that you do within your own business?
So man, you've got good questions. That's one of those questions like failure for me. So when I think about interpersonal relationships, like my relationship with my husband, which can be awesome and challenging, I know intellectually it's so much better when I stay curious. Like, oh, he said that thing. That's super interesting. I wonder why he said that thing. I wonder what he was thinking about when he said that thing, as opposed to, you said that thing.
Right.
And how often is that our reaction,
I know.
And so curiosity, as I was reading something just the other day, that, when we were little, we were always curious. We know that as adults, when we have babies and little people in our universe, like, they are so curious about
the endless stream of questions, right?
Right. Why and how come, and like, let's explore it, and let's eat it, and let's let's check it all out. And as we grow up, that's one of the things that often gets damped down, suppressed in our universe, is that innate curiosity. And I think the more that we can really get curious about, that's so interesting, I wonder why that's happening. I remember, now I actually am gonna date myself, in the late 1980s, probably 88, 89. And I had a job where I was a community organizer in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, New York. And this is when a lot of rappers were writing songs about Bed-Stuy because of the gangs and the violence and the shootings, and you know, it was a rough neighborhood. And I eventually was asked to do a study of public schools in Brooklyn, which is a fascinating place to do this because they were really great public schools and they were not so good public schools in parts like Bed-Stuy. And there was this one day that I was in Bed-Stuy, and it was raining, and a teacher had put up the ABCs above a series of door jambs because she was teaching in the hallway because they had run out of classroom space. And so she was teaching kids who were 5 and 6 years old how to read. And they're sitting in a hall, and kids are running around, and there was water coming through the ceiling. And I remember thinking, if I had been 5 and sitting in a hall trying to learn how to read, how would my life have turned out? And then my next question was, why is this happening? And that's one of the questions as I've grown and aged and matured, and then about 4 years ago started my own business. It's one of the key questions that I'm always asking inside of organizations, either out loud or just in my head, like, oh, why is this happening? But sometimes the culture is such that I can ask it out loud, like, this is super interesting. Why do you think this is what's going on? And so cultivating that curiosity in ourselves, getting back in touch with that little kid who still lives inside of all of us, and getting curious about why is this going on, and then flipping it around and getting curious about why am I reacting this way? What just got triggered in me that I'm now doing whatever it is that I'm doing. I think the more curious we can be about ourselves and about each other and about our world, that's actually where I have hope. Is, you know, when we can really get curious, that we can make change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. What a great story too. Oh my goodness. Well, speaking of stories, can you think of a favorite story from your childhood? And it could be something that was read to you or that you read yourself.
So when I was 5, and my little brother was born when I was 6.5. So this is when it was just me and my mom and dad. We took a trip. So I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we went out west. We got as far as Salt Lake City. So we got quite a bit west. And my mom had The Trumpeter Swan, and read that book out loud on that trip. And so I have that memory of my mom reading that book. And we were in a VW Bug, and you know, this was in the late 60s. And so, you know, there were no seat belts, there were no car seats. And so my dad had, my dad's an architect and very handy. And so he had rigged up this thing that was plywood and then foam rubber and then cloth that he then staple gunned to the plywood. He rigged up this thing that fit in behind the front seats and across to the back seat, so that he extended out my back seat area. So I had this big area that was the back seat and then that foot space, but it was just this big flat area. So I had all this space because I'm only 5. And being back in that space and listening to my mom read that book. My favorite book when I was a little bit older and could read for myself was Well, there's Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing, which is running around in my head, but then there was also, The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Franklin.
Right.
I
That one
love
was
that book.
so great.
And talk about a book that connects with your imagination and your curiosity.
Oh, yeah. Oh, such a great book. Yeah. And any, I mean, beyond that, kind of any lessons that you can think of, or kind of values that came through in any of those books that you mentioned that you still think about, or that, I don't know, maybe informed you growing up?
So on that same trip out west, one of my biggest memories of that trip is sitting on my dad's shoulders watching Old Faithful go off,
Yeah.
and I got cold. And so my dad was, I don't think is so much anymore, but was the kind of man who would wear an undershirt or a t-shirt and then like a button-up shirt over it. And so he took off his button-up shirt and gave it to me. And so it's this memory of sitting on my dad's shoulders, wrapped in his shirt, watching Old Faithful. And it's a security memory. It's a loved memory.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that connects to me, you know, obviously it's this juicy memory with my dad, who just on Tuesday turned 84. The lesson that I've taken from that is the importance of creating real connection with people. And, you know, people are people. And one of, you know, when I was starting off in the workforce, there was this whole idea of you were one person at home and you were a different person at work. And one of the things that I think is so great about what's happened in culture is that there has become a realization that we are not, in fact, bifurcated humans. We are the same human.
Right.
And so the things that we can do to help create psychological safety, to help people feel known and connected with and safe at work, that's actually what's going to get the very best from our people. So it stopped being this sort of like woo-woo touchy-feely thing, and actually an acknowledgement of what's going to enhance the bottom line is when you can create that so that people can feel like I can bring my whole self to work. That's when you get the best from humans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's such a great memory. I love that. And I'm thinking too, that there's probably like even scent kind of, you know, associated with that, and just all of those pieces that really, that cement those memories in our minds.
Yeah, I mean, there was visual, there was smell, there was sound.
All of those pieces.
Probably everything except taste.
Yes. So if, so part of learning to swim is investigating people's bright spots and blind spots. So that being said, what would you say is kind of one of your in plain sight talents? So what is something that people, you know, if I were to kind of interview people who know you, would say, oh God, yeah, Janine is just amazing at this?
Janine is amazing at enrolling people. So I get excited about the things that I get excited about, and you know it. And I create an energy that's like, oh, I wanna come do that with you. And I get excited about things that other people are excited about. So I am both enrolling and I am easily enrolled. Like if you're up to something that you're super excited about, I want to play with you.
Yes, I would agree 100%. So and then what would be kind of more of a hidden talent that you have?
I am really good at reading a room. So I am good at looking at a room and understanding, looking at body language and like, okay, there's something going on over there. There's something going on over here, which is great when I'm doing a presentation or helping to enroll people in something that an organization is up to. Like, all right, we need to do a little bit more work over there. We need to do a little more work over there. I'm also good at, I don't know how to say it other than like reading the energy. Like, I can see the body language. I can see the facial micro expressions. I can also, there's also things that are a little more woo-woo-y, that are a little bit more in the unseen, that I can see, that I can feel.
Nice. I like it. So what would be one word to describe your professional journey? I know, one word.
Unexpected.
I like that. I like that a lot. And one word to describe your life.
Joyful.
Oh, so great. So thinking back, what was your very first paid position or your first job?
Does babysitting count?
If you were paid for it, it absolutely does.
Yeah, so babysitting, and then very soon thereafter, I was a camp counselor. And probably happening at the same time. I went to a day camp. I went to 2 different day camps, and then eventually I was a counselor at both camps at different times. So yeah, kids and being with them, being with their energy, being with their curiosity. I've always loved the energy that little people bring.
Yeah, for sure. And it can be exhausting too.
Oh, amen.
I just remember going to camp and, after a full day of camp, you were just like, as a kid, just exhausted. Or maybe that's just me. I'm a little bit more of an introvert. So,
Yeah, me too.
So thinking about those first babysitting and camp counseling positions, anything that you can kind of see that informs your current profession?
So one of the things that there's two incidences that I remember really clearly. One's a babysitting and one's a camp counseling. I was babysitting and I was also accountable for making dinner. And maybe I was 12 or 13. And the instructions for making dinner included things that I don't know what that word means. And I called my mom. Mom, it says I'm supposed to do da-da-da-da. What? And that pops into my brain because one of the places where I personally struggle is in asking for help. I'm not great at asking for help. And obviously, I used to be better. When I was 12, the first thing that occurred to me was I should call my mom and find out how to do this. Obviously, this was also the days before Google, which is a way that we all ask for help.
We all ask for help. Yeah.
And we don't think of it that way. We think of it like, oh, well, I'll just ask Google because that's what we do now. And for probably a year, I had a big Post-it on my computer that said, the smartest people ask for help. because I know that that's true. And one of my places where my ego is strong is I know that I am smart. And so if smart people ask for help and I am smart, ergo, I should be asking for help. And so it was a tool to help me strengthen that muscle.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that's so great. So given this unusual time that we're faced with, could you share kind of one of your best or have you developed any habits that have been helpful to get you through, changes in how we're doing work, how we're communicating, all those things? Do you have kind of a simple habit that you could share with us?
Yeah, so one of the things that was happening in the early COVID days is that everyone was feeling so disconnected and so lonely. And I actually remember the first time, Kristan, that you and I got on a Zoom, and I was like, oh, look, it's your face. Like, because the only face I was seeing was my husband's face and our dog and our cat.
Right.
And so, like, to see the face of somebody else who I know and I love, it was just like, oh.
I know.
And now we're in this time where we're on Zoom or GoToMeeting or Google Hangout or whatever platform we use a lot. I mean, there have been days that I've been on something all day long, and I end my day with like an introvert hangover, like, oh my God, I need to go into a cave all by myself. And so I think one of the really great opportunities now is for us to get more conscious about what are the times when it really is important to be able to see each other and connect that way, and what are the times when a good old-fashioned phone call is really perfectly fine.
Yes.
Because, Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and
for sure.
And it now has its own implications and ramifications for us. And so being a little bit more strategic about, is this something where we need to be face-to-face or not? And then the other thing, part of why Zoom fatigue is happening is because our brains are used to being able to get a lot of information from people from their body language. And when we're not seeing people, at least, from the belly button up, it's very hard for our brain to get enough data. And so our brain feels exhausted from hunting for data that we can't find. And so often I will encourage people, like, back up so that people can see more of your body, because it's going to help your brain calm down. It's gonna fight Zoom fatigue, because we're used to all doing webinars and things where all you see is this much of a human, which is about what I see of you. And it's not enough for our brain to get enough data.
Yes, and you did several months back. You did a great webinar, and you brought up that point, and I had forgotten that. So thank you for reminding me. And I'm going to make sure that if you'd be willing to, it'd be so great to include a link to that.
Sure.
If that's something that's available for folks, because it still is, it's even more relevant, and it had so many good points. So we'll make sure that gets in the notes. Thank you for reminding me that.
You're welcome.
Well, we are kind of coming to an end here of the interview, but I'd love to just, I've got like 3 more questions. One of them being, what is your secret or not so secret to a meaningful life?
My secret to a meaningful life. Never thought about this question. This is a great question. Is one of the things that's actually been happening out of COVID is that people are really investing in the relationships that matter to them and letting go of a lot of the other ones that that don't feed them.
Yeah.
And that is definitely one of my secrets to a happy life. It's to find the people that you love, that you connect with, that you leave them. And even if you're an introvert like me, like you, after I'm with you, I feel energized. After I'm with a lot of people, I feel depleted. And so it's finding those people that have you feel energized, have you feel seen, have you feel known, make your heart happy. Lean into those relationships and don't worry about the other ones.
I love that. It gave me goosebumps. You just put words to exactly how I feel. And thank you. So pivoting a bit and going back to the work that you do, what do you see is the most common element that employees miss because you and I do work around this. This is kind of, where I do a deep dive. It has a lot of, is around employee engagement.
Yes.
And that's so much of the work that you're doing too. And so what's the most common kind of thing that employers rather miss when trying to focus on employee engagement?
In my opinion and in my experience, the biggest thing that people miss is thinking that the best way to connect with their employees and to engage their employees is through money and benefits. And when you ask employees, money and benefits ranks like almost dead last.
Right.
The things that employees care about are feeling connected, feeling like they're part of an organization that is up to something, knowing that their opinion and their voice matters. It's the difference between diversity and inclusion. Inclusion is about having a seat at the table. And people want to feel like they have a seat at the table, they have a say, they have an ability to affect their own destiny, and that somebody else cares about their destiny too. So feeling like and knowing that your boss is interested in what you want, in how you want your career to grow, in your own personal and professional development is one of the biggest things that matters, especially again to the younger generations, which are now the majority of the workforce.
Right.
And so it's the biggest thing that employers get confused about.
Yeah, I would concur. Very much so. It makes me think of sending out surveys, right? And this idea of sending out a survey, and then, it's like, people wonder why they don't get a better response, especially if they're sending out an anonymous type of survey, because so oftentimes in different organizations, you survey and then you never,
and then nothing happens.
And then nothing happens.
Or nothing happens visibly.
Nothing happens visibly. Yeah. And there's not even kind of an acknowledgement of, hey, we got the results, we're doing this, or, that.
We learned this and therefore we're implementing that. Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Crickets.
And I mean, talk about like such a simple tweak that
and such a waste of time and money.
Well, such a waste of time. And then conversely, if you want to do surveys, such an easy way to actually make them matter.
Fix the problem. Right.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Right. So, close the communication loop.
Yes, for sure. So my last question is there a question that you wish I had asked you?
Man, I wish you'd asked me about scuba diving.
I kind of threw you off with the whole learning to swim thing. Well, right. we'll do a Janine and scuba diving episode to come.
Cool.
So something to look forward to. And
probably is not going to happen, people.
Well, I was thinking I'd have you all in your gear, like, and you
that would be fun.
through.
Yeah, my wetsuit, my regulator. I mean, there are lessons from scuba diving that one can definitely bring to any place in the world. So. Oh
my God, I love that. Okay, definitely. I'm taking a note. That is our next conversation. Awesome. Thank you so much. It's just, I always love our conversations. You are such a bright spot for me. So thank you.
I got you, baby.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Our goal is to inspire others and share stories to find meaning in your daily life. Let go of the traditional norms and be yourself at home, work, and beyond. The awareness of bright spots and blind spots is a performance-enhancing tool that you can apply to your life and to your organization today.